Good evening. I am Jamie Gill, the president of Piscataway Lodge, Elks Lodge number 2414. I would like to thank the officers, members, and guests for attending this evening's Remembrance ceremony. Before we begin, I would like to ask everyone to turn off their cell phones or please set them to vibrate. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag and remain standing for the prayer read by our Lodge chaplain, Sue Bernstein. Please recite with me the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dear Lord, we come together to lift up and pray for families and loved ones of those who lost their lives on September 11th. Lord, their lives that will never be forgotten, and our hearts go out to those who lost someone dear of the events of that day. Those left behind were robbed of such important and valuable people. Please comfort them as the anniversary returns again. Be present among them in their grief, and Lord, we pray that their surroundings them would offer kindness where they can, that they would be able to celebrate the precious lives of those who died in honor. May sweet memories of good times be shared and recalled, and that their sense of peace is knowing that they do not grieve alone. Please bless them with your love this day. In God's name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Sue. Today is September 11th, and we are here. Oh, you can sit down. Sorry. Today is September 11th, and we are here to commemorate the events that took place on this date. I am honored to be standing in front of you today as one of the speakers representing our lodge as we perform this remembrance ceremony for our community. May the lives remembered, the deeds recognized, and the spirit reawakened be eternal beacons, which reaffirm respect for life, strength, our resolve to persevere freedom, and inspire an end to hatred, ignorance, and intolerance. These words are a part of the mission statement of the National September 11th Memorial and Museum at the World Trade Center in New York City. As we know, freedom is the cornerstone of the American way of life, and on September 11th, 2001, our lives were forever changed. Today, we acknowledge the 22nd year anniversary of the day we witnessed a purposeful, large-scale destruction of our innocent and defensive lives on American soil. Just as December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor Day defined a generation, September 11th helped shape who we are and what we believe in. It is remembered us how fragile our freedom can be, but the day holds countless stories of survival, courage, and heroism, which also revealed the strength of our freedom. We pay tribute by honoring those who lost their freedom on 9/11, and those brave warriors who have made the ultimate sacrifice by defending our freedom since that day. Thousands lost lives when 2 planes crashed into the World Trade Center, another into the Pentagon, and a 4th plane heading towards Washington, D.C., which fell in a Pennsylvania field. When the towers fell, 749 New Jersey residents, 3 from Piscataway, lost their lives. We felt shock, disbelief, and anguish. And as our country, we mourned and searched for answers. But more importantly, we gathered the strength to move forward. On December 18, 2001, President George W. Bush signed Joint Resolution 71, presented by the U.S. House of Representatives, designating September 11th of each year as Patriot Day. On this day, the President directs that the American flag be flown at half-staff for a moment of silence beginning at 8:46 in the morning, Easter Daylight Time, commemorating the time that the first crash on the September 11, 2001. This evening, we gather to remember the people we lost on that day. We have all seen or heard the phrase, "America will never forget." And 22 years later, Piscataway Lodge has gathered again to hold true to that claim. At this time, I would like to introduce Peter Naiman, our Americanism Chair.
As we and the rest of the country mark the 22nd anniversary of this event, many of you have already revisited the emotions you felt in the moments that followed the terrorist attacks. On that clear sky blue morning of 9/11, our focus began as we watched with horror the tragedy unfolding on our television screens as the Twin Towers were engulfed in flames and slowly collapsed. As we understood the enormity of what we were witnessing, think about the courage of our policemen and firefighters who rushed into the two burning towers to get thousands to safety. Little did we know that only a short time later, more tragedy would befall us as a plane crashed into a section of the Pentagon and more lives were senselessly lost. Maureen Chapman will now read a short poem entitled "Why." I would like to invite the Deputy Chief, Michelle Pilch, and Mayor Brian Waller to light one of our candles as she does. And just to let you know, the poem "Why" is inscribed in a tablet, which is outside by our memorial, so anyone could read it anytime.
Grief and sorrow struck this nation in an unexplainable way, leaving us surrounded by tears and sorrow, and only one thing left to say. Why? Why did this have to happen? What did we do so wrong? Why did you have to take our loved ones? How do we replace those who are gone? But we still will not go quietly. We will stand up and fight. United, we will stand together for what is truth, what is right. Heroes rose out of the ashes to save the life we thought was lost, never thinking what might happen, never caring what the cost. They didn't do it for the glory. They didn't do it for the fame. They only did what they knew was right. They are our heroes who have no name. United, we can build a better tomorrow. Let us finish what they began to start. Let us say a prayer for them together and keep them close in heart.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Maureen. I would like to introduce Lodge officers Kevin Nielsen and Dave Lindsay.
As we all know, the next planned attack, a flight originally scheduled to land in San Francisco, was hijacked in midair and was headed towards our nation's capital, Washington, D.C. Getting information via cell phones and with the realization of a terrorist plan underway, 40 courageous passengers and crew of United Flight 93 took matters into their own hands. as they stormed the cabin of the plane to save lives of perhaps hundreds of innocent people as their plane went down in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. We have since come to recognize Todd Beamer's phrase, "Let's roll." While Dave Lindsay reads a poem entitled "Let's Roll," our district deputy, Dennis Kopic, will light a candle in their memory.
Let's roll, on towards that majestic goal, to defeat the enemy in his 9/11 roll. Let's roll, not kowtowing to the spoil, but ever rejoicing to the mighty toil. Let's roll, notwithstanding our grief and death, for we're the ones who've been put to the test. Let's roll, not just now, but in our waning years, lift up our torch to the welcoming cheers. Let's roll, for we are the ones who gave up our lives for our loving sons. Roll on, don't dare give up the fight, for life, liberty, and happiness is within our sight. Roll on, courageous light.
In an effort to tie the three events of September 11th together, the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and United's Flight 93, a 2-ton, 14-foot-high cross made of steel from the World Trade Center was transported on Saturday, August 23, 2008, from New York to the Shanksville, Pennsylvania Volunteer Fire Department, as part of a monument in front of the firehouse to honor those who gave their lives on United Flight 93. As hundreds of firefighters, policemen, and citizens throughout New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania proudly waved our country's flag and bowed their head in prayer, the steel cross made a 311-mile journey, accompanied by hundreds of motorcyclists, many of them current or retired New York firefighters. On September 10, 2011, the first part of the Flight 93 National Memorial, which is located at the site of the crash in Shanksville, was dedicated. And on September 10, 2015, the Visitor Center was opened. And as visitors to the site gather, the Tower of Voices, a 93-foot-tall musical instrument made of steel and concrete, holding 40 wind chimes, one dedicated to each of the 40 heroes that took back the plane after it was hijacked during the terrorist attacks, will peal forth. What was a common field one day is now a field of honor forever. In New York City in 2011, at the site of the World Trade Center, the National September 11th Memorial opened. The memorial's twin reflecting pools are each nearly an acre in size and feature the largest man-made waterfalls in North America. The pools sit within the footprints where the Twin Towers once stood. The names of every person who died in the 2001 attacks are inscribed into bronze panels edging the memorial pools. A powerful reminder of the largest loss of life resulting from a foreign attack on American soil. In 2014, the memorialism opened at the site.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Dave. In 2006, member Bob Martineau created a replica of the Twin Towers from the tree trunk of a fallen tree in front of our lodge. Sadly, weather took its toll on our monument, and those towers succumbed to nature. Noting this, Corey Pine, a member of Boy Scout Troop 67, inquired about a project to be completed at our lodge in order to earn his Eagle Scout badge. Noting the new foundation for the towers provided by lodge member Frank Catessa, with Corey's insightful planning and help from his fellow Troop 67 members, family, and friends, you can now see before you a truly impressive 9/11 memorial ground. All these monuments stand to remind us and future generations of the events of September 11, 2001. And to honor the fathers, mothers, sons, and daughters, neighbors, and friends who lost their lives on that fateful day. Let us take a moment to remember Harry Glenn, age 38, Ling Ming Gai, age 34, and Yish Tembi, age 59, all residents of Piscataway who did not make it home on September 11th. Our fallen heroes' lives were not in vain. We will remember the hundreds of uniformed personnel and civilians who sacrificed their lives by running into the towers, the heroes who remained in the towers to help others escape, the brave passengers and crew of Flight 93. And we will remember the 184 unsuspecting victims in the Pentagon. I would like to take a moment to remember the survivors of 9/11. They are special people who have gone through pain and suffering, difficult losses, and life-altering experiences. We cannot begin to comprehend the emotions they have endured. We have the utmost respect for them, and they will remain in our thoughts and prayers. At this time, I would ask District Deputy Dennis Kopek, a 9/11 survivor, to say a few words.
Thank you, Exalted Ruler. As we gather here today to commemorate the tragic day in 2001, we are trying to honor the sacrifice of first responders, civilians who were tragically lost that day. Approximately 3,000 of them. More of them were killed at Pearl Harbor. It was an attack against the American way of life and our values. By holding this ceremony, you have committed to never forget that day and reaffirm our resolve to fight against any foe that is intent on destroying us. Every year, as 9/11 comes around, I have a personal connection to that day. It was a beautiful day. The most beautiful day that anyone can remember. If you talk to any survivor or anyone who was around that day, they will tell you that first sentence every time. It was the most perfect day that was imaginable. Working on the 63rd floor of the Tower 1, it brings back memories of some of my coworkers that were lost that day, 84 of them, and the sights and sounds of the building collapsing, people falling out of the sky, and terror of people trying to escape death. The anxiety of not knowing your future because in an instant your world has changed. And the thoughts of loved ones not knowing if you were alive or dead. 9/11 did not start on 9/11. It started on February 26, 1993. The bombing of the World Trade Center at the beginning of the results, which resulted in 4 deaths of Port Authority employees. Monica Smith was 8.5 months pregnant. It was her last day on the job. She was going out on maternity leave. Bill Knapp and Steve Knapp and Bill Macko were retiring the next month. They were due to retire in May. It turned out to be a rehearsal for evacuating the building on 9/11. At 8:46, the first plane struck the North Tower between 91st and 93rd floor. I was at my desk on the 63rd floor. The building began to whiplash back and forth, with me hanging onto the desk, wondering if the building was going to break in half. After whipsawing back and forth several times, it just stopped. We immediately started to move down the staircase until we reached the 44th floor. By this time, the lower floors had been filled with people, and so we had to wait. Then we heard a loud explosion. We didn't know what it was at the time, but it was the South Tower, which was struck. We managed to get out of the street 10 minutes before finding out the South Tower was started to collapse. All we could see was smoke and fear. The building was falling on top of us. Luckily, I made it home that night, not knowing what my future would be. 3,000 people died that day. If the terrorists had waited another 20 minutes, the building would have been full
and the casualties would have been 7,000 to 9,000. On any given day, the population of those two towers is 50,000 people, not counting the tourists and people just wandering around the building. That is about the population of Piscataway. I think it's a little bit less than your population in the town. Through DNA, we have identified recently the remains of two victims. Over 1,000 bodies and victims have not. 353 firefighters perished that day. The first one was killed by a falling body, someone jumping out of the building. Since then, 381 have died from related illnesses. 85% of those were under the age of 45 people. The age of 45. They never found any complete bodies. You'll just find parts. You'll find a finger or arm. I remember a woman who had her there's an arm because she was still holding her pocketbook. Well, that's all they found. So you're not getting any real bodies. And when I went back to work, they told me to get the refrigerated trucks for a morgue. And after about 3 days, we figured out we didn't need the morgue anymore because they weren't going to be any bodies. 22 years, we have rebuilt and destroyed our enemies, and by keeping the memories and honoring those who perished, we strengthen our resolve against those who do us harm and unite us all as Americans. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Since the horrific events that unfolded on that fateful day, tens of thousands of U.S. troops have been injured or have been given the ultimate sacrifice on the war against terrorism and in the continued fight for our freedom. Lodge veterans Billy Kleeman and Dan Bernstein will light the final candle in honor of memory. All veterans present today are also welcome to join them to salute and pay tribute to our military. Go ahead. Thank you. I would like to ask everyone to remain seated as we take a moment to reflect and remember all those we have lost. During this time, please feel free to come up and light a candle in memory or in honor of your loved ones. We have lit candles of remembrance and reflected upon the emotions of this day. At this time, I would like to thank Boy Scout Troop number 67 for once again participating in this evening's ceremony. I have the pleasure to introduce Senator Bob Smith.
Thanks for the kind invitation from the Piscataway Elks to return to this very auspicious ceremony. Frequently, when I'm asked to speak at a significant event, I try to see what the rest of the world is saying. So today, I spent an hour or two going through the editorials across the country and trying to select one that I think brings a significant message home. And I did find one that I thought was one of the really better ones. The title of the editorial is "We Must Never Forget September 11th, 2001." And it's going to make the point, it's very short, but it's going to make the point that in addition to us looking at this tremendous tragedy, we also have a responsibility to tell our kids about it. This is 22 years later. There's all the gentle persons lined up on that wall. They didn't witness the history that you and I witnessed. All right? It's history to them. So let me, if I can, read the very brief editorial and I'll make the final point. So the editorial is, "The tragedy of September 11th, 2001 keeps moving deeper into the past. Yet even more than 2 decades later, the memories of that horrific day remain fresh and painful to those of us who lived through it. Hard as it may be to believe, this week the nation is marking the 22nd anniversary of the attacks that killed nearly 3,000 people in New York, the Pentagon, aboard a plane that crashed in a field in Somerset County, Pennsylvania, diverted from its presumed Washington target by heroic passengers. Enough time has passed since then for people just born or not yet born who have grown into young men and women. A generation of Americans have grown up knowing only the post-9/11 world of enhanced security measures and lingering anxiety. For them, the events of that day amount to history, not to memory. There's been considerable effort over the years to teach young people what happened on that fateful late summer day, how an ordinary Tuesday turned into unspeakable tragedy. It is impossible to fully convey the feelings those memories elicit, but it's imperative that we keep trying so that future generations will never forget. It started that morning with a report of a plane crashing into one of the twin towers of New York's World Trade Center. It was presumed to be an accident at first, until another plane hit the other tower in Lower Manhattan. Later that morning came the attack on the Pentagon and the collapse of the New York towers, shown on TV in what seemed like an endless loop. Finally, there was the painful wait to learn just what happened to United Airlines Flight 93, which disappeared en route to San Francisco from Newark, New Jersey. The days, weeks, and months that followed were awful. There was the epic cleanup at the World Trade Center site and the agonized period of uncertainty for people waiting to learn the fate of their loved ones. Story after story emerged of victims, most of them ordinary folks just going about their business, now having left devastated families behind. We also learned of the great heroism on the part of so many people, particularly the first responders who rushed into scenes of devastation despite the overwhelming risk of death or severe injury. That led to a new respect for first responders that has continued to this day. In the midst of this challenging time in late 2001, Americans developed a profound sense of unity. That was no small thing at the time. The nation had just gone through a tumultuous period of political conflict, including the impeachment of President Bill Clinton. The furious dispute over the outcome of the 2000 presidential election still lingered. But for a while, after September 11th, all that was put aside, and flag waving became very much in fashion across the political spectrum. That didn't last, of course. By the time the 2004 presidential election arrived, Americans were very much at odds again, with disagreements over the war in Iraq leading the way. Amid the deep polarization we now see in America, this week's observance represents an opportunity to think of one another as fellow citizens rather than members of the other side, at least for a little while. Seek out opportunities to do that, not just this week, but in the weeks and months to come, as we approach what promised to be another extraordinarily bitter presidential election year. Of all the ways that the 9/11 anniversary is commemorated each year, ceremonies at schools are among the most important. Such programs remind communities of what needs to be done this year and every year, bringing the lessons of September 11, 2001 directly to young people. Doing so is what is the most appropriate tribute to the thousands of lives who were cut short on that fateful day. May they be remembered, and this anniversary and every day following for generations to come. I'd like to publicly congratulate the Piscataway Elks, because that's what you're doing. You're trying to keep the memory in all of our minds, at the forefront of our thinking, and most importantly, training our children as to what happened, so we can all continue to learn these lessons and mourn these really honorable people who we have lost. So on that note, see you next year.
Thank you, Senator. Next will be Mayor Brian Waller.
Good evening, everyone. Before I say a few words, I'd like to acknowledge some of the officials that are in the room. We have our County Commissioner, Chanel McCollum. Also our County Sheriff, Millie Scott. And we have Councilwoman Sharon Carmichael, Councilman Dennis Espinoza, our Deputy Chief, Michelle Pilch, Councilman at Large and Council President, or she's a Ward 1 Councilman Frank Earn, Councilwoman at Large Gabrielle Cahill, and 4th Ward Councilwoman Michelle Lombardi. We also have Nancy Corradino from the Board of Ed, and also Kim Ling from the Board of Ed. I don't know if I'm missing anybody else here. Okay, I just want to make sure. I think I got everybody. Okay, I'll try to speak a little louder for those folks in the very back. Thank you. I see the sheriff shaking her head. Okay. Okay, thank you for being here and for joining together as a community. In our great country today, we unite with other communities to remember, to mourn, to pay tribute. Thousands of American lives were lost on that day, 22 years ago. Thousands more are still affected by that great tragedy. What can we do to honor the dead, to honor those still suffering? What is our responsibility as a community, as a country? As much as September 11th was an attack on innocent victims, it was also an attack on the bedrock of America, our democracy, our equality, our shared beliefs that every human being has an inalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The horrific day was most certainly a mass murder. However, the intent was try to make America turn a dark corner. But we will not. We will stay on a lighted path, one of unity of all, who call the United States home, one of justice, of freedom. We will not let our shared grief turn to despondency. We will rise to the occasion, and we will join together every day as one community that welcomes and respects and that values us all. And before I close out, I would like to ask the council members to come up, and we're going to present a proclamation honoring the Elks for all the hard work they do and putting together this 9/11 ceremony. If I may, if you want to call Exalted Ruler, I don't know who else you might want up here from your leadership team. And as everybody's coming up, if you do not have a chance yet, I highly suggest watching last night's 60 Minutes program regards to what the FDNY went through that day. It's very riveting, and one that you should have your children sit down and watch. Okay, so Exalted Ruler, if you don't mind, I guess I should probably read it. Whereas throughout American history, away from sacrifice and endured hardships and ultimate freedom for all the people in our great country to enjoy. The American ideals of liberty, democracy, justice, and opportunity for all is a responsibility for all generations to uphold and to nurture. And the attacks on September 11, 2011 left thousands dead at the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and Shanksville, Pennsylvania. And many of those who survived the attacks still bear physical and emotional tears. And whereas the bravery and dedication of the first responders on that tragic day and many of the days that followed will always be remembered for this as a sterling example of devotion to the country. And whereas the benevolent and protective order of the Elks, through their constitution and organization and its lodge, should be applauded and committed for all the commitment and preservation of those memories. So I would like to present that a National Patriotism Week. I want to present this plaque with the fellow council members here. So we can exalt the ruler. And I want to really thank, I know it's just not the remembrance of Patriots Day that the Elks do a lot of other notable programs throughout the year, and I want to thank you for all the hard work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, council members.
Thank you. I would like to introduce Sheriff Mildred Scott.
Good evening, everyone. Now, remembering the day that it happened, and I have a vivid memory of that day, as all of you do here, except for our young people against the wall there. And I remember exactly where I was, and I'm quite sure you remember where you were. And I happened to be in a car with my two grandsons, going from Piscataway up to East Orange. And when we heard what had happened, we just could not believe it, what happened. So when we talked to my two grandsons, my daughter's sons, they do not remember that day. They do not. They were just too young to remember that day. But we talked to them about it, and through remembrance of what the Elks is doing, making sure that we will never forget, they will never forget it either, because we've been talking about it. And to the young people here, I say to you, it is history. It is history that is being taught to you. It's probably been taught to you from the day you were born, and it will continue to be part of your history. But I say to you all here today that, it's the lives that we lost. And not only the lives that we lost, but the people that survived and the medical stuff that they have been going through. And some of them have passed away because of their medical. And for the civilians that were there, the heroism with them, and for our law enforcement, and for our firefighters and the EMS, we could never forget them also. So when we talk about 9/11, there's so many people that it has affected in so many different ways. And this is one of the days that I think is a day that puts darkness in our hearts. But we must make sure that that darkness does not stay there, that we bring it out, and to we be proud of who we are as people. And I want to thank you for putting on this program, and thank you for inviting me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sheriff. Piscataway Police Deputy Chief Michelle Pilch. Sorry.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. I don't have a prepared speech, but what I will tell you is about my experience. So I came here in 2000. I became a police officer in July of 2000. And I remember that morning because my mother woke me up. I believe I was working midnights. And she said, "You need to turn the TV on." So when I turned the TV on, the first tower was collapsing. And she said, "Do you have to go?" And my heart broke for her because she was so fearful that I was going to have to go there. But a little bit of backstory to that is before I came here, I worked for Morgan Stanley Dean Witter in New York City and was offered a very lucrative position at the World Trade Center. And I declined it to take this job. Who would have known? So for me to be standing here in front of you today in this ceremony to tell you about my experience and how over the years that you think of that over and over again, you wonder what could have been or maybe what should have been. And I like to think that this is what should have been. So I thank you for having me here today. And it's an honor and a privilege to remember all of those that we lost and all those who live with what we endured. So thank you.
Thank you. Our District Deputy Grand Exalted Ruler, Dennis Kopek, thank you for coming. Do you want to say more, or are you okay?
No, I just want to say that,
Okay.
at the end of this ceremony, I have a catalog of pictures that we collected when we were, after we left the Trade Center and we were at a different location. And we managed to gather some pretty exclusive pictures that some people don't have. For example, I've got pictures of people going down the staircase. Mm-hmm. We got from the Life magazine was on the 55th floor, so they were taking pictures. We got them. So if you're interested, the catalog's going to be at the somewhere in the back there, and you can go ahead and look through.
All right. Thank you, Dennis. I'd like to introduce our Central District Vice President, Gail Reichert.
Real quick, thank you, Exalted Ruler. As we look back on the events of September 11th, 2001, we remember the bravery, courage, and humanity shown that day, and the many to follow. Remember those lost and those whose lives will have been changed forever. May we never forget.
Thank you, Gail. And I'll just also like to let you guys know that and introduce Madeline Lennox, who's our Central District Americanism Chair. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for inviting me.
This concludes our Patriot Day Remembrance Ceremony. God bless America and God bless our troops. Thank you all for coming.